Hello and welcome back to Calligraphy Biz Corner. I'm Elaine.
And I'm Xiao Chen, and we're so excited to bring you an interview with a fellow calligrapher today. Kendall of Cedar Cliff Designs is joining us, and we're going to be talking about live calligraphy at weddings with her. Elaine and I both know Kendall through our education programs. Kendall joined my pro wedding calligrapher course in 2022, and I've gotten the chance to see her business grow and evolve over time, which is so much fun. And she'll talk a little bit about her journey in this interview, too.
Yeah, and Kendall and I connected last year in the spring of 2024. We connected on Instagram. And then I had the pleasure of helping her with some of her client experience and her automations within Honeybook. So, as you are about to see, Kendall is such a joy. She has such an interesting story. And I also feel like this episode is just so well timed coming off of the heels of our 2025 wedding trends episode, because we talked
Good.
about how, live interactive experiences are indeed a trend for 2025. And now we're diving deep into that with our conversation with Kendall today.
And she seriously shares such a wealth of information. Make sure you get your notebook out because I bet you'll be furiously taking notes because I know I was. And a couple things that just really stood out to me during the conversation is like there really is so much more nuance about performing live calligraphy at a wedding versus kind of the corporate and brand live events, which we kind of talk about those differences and we really try to highlight those throughout the episode. I think part of the reason that this is the case is like weddings are such a emotional, personal, important day versus when you're doing live events at for a brand, retail, corporate client. It's more of marketing for them or it might be team building, but it's not like this like personal like you're going to have pictures up in your house of this day type of thing. So I think that just there's just a level of of detail that's different, a level of experience and expectations that's different for a wedding.
Yeah, absolutely. We dive deep into all of these differences, but kind of piggybacking off of that, it's like doing live calligraphy or engraving or like live event artistry, whatever it is that you are providing at a wedding, it's really creating more of that like full service experience for both your client as well as their guests versus just getting paid to show up to do your job for 5 hours and then leave. Kendall really highlights taking into account that entire client experience from beginning when they're inquiring with you, thinking through all the logistics to actually being there on the wedding day and things to take into account. And I just feel like she reframes your thinking of positioning this service as an actual experience, like I said, versus just, you know, showing up for your time and getting paid for it. So, and at the end of the day, this is a luxury experience. This isn't something that anybody is going to be doing for their wedding day. It's going to be very for a very particular wedding style for a particular client, and it is going to be creating that elevated luxury experience.
Yeah, and I think it just really reminds us and I think like pushes all of us to think about like what should a luxury experience look like? What should it entail? Because it's so easy for us to put luxury calligrapher, luxury engraver, luxury experience, but what does that really mean? How do you design it in a way that is truly elevated and gives people that, the feel that this is like above and beyond, right? So let's introduce Kendall. She is the mompreneur behind Cedar Cliff Designs, specializing in crafting unique and personalized experiences for businesses, brands, and brides with her on site calligraphy and engraving services. From corporate events to weddings and beyond, Kendall is passionate about making every guest feel like a VIP through meaningful custom gifting experiences that no machine can ever replicate. I just love that intro. All right, let's go to the interview.
Welcome, Kendall, to Calligraphy Biz Corner. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here with you guys.
We're super excited to have you as well. Xiaochen and I both know you from our calligraphy business program. So it is such a joy and a pleasure to have you on today to chat about your journey. For anybody who doesn't already know you, can you just start by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself and, how you got started in calligraphy?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Kendall. I'm a wife and a mom to 3 little kids, ages 5 and under. So life is a little full and crazy, but we love it. I'm the owner of Cedar Cliff Designs, where I specialize in live event calligraphy and engraving services, and I serve businesses, brands, and brides throughout the Phoenix and Scottsdale area here in Arizona. So I love it. It's a blast and it's busy and it's booming here. So we are just having a blast over here. It's so fun.
Well, I would love to hear a little bit about your journey because I feel like it's nice to highlight the twists and turns of like entrepreneurship, right? And kind of see the backstory of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah.
So, if I understand correctly, I think you got started with like wedding signage and calligraphy primarily. And then at some point, you kind of pivoted into creating digital products.
Mhm.
And then after that, it seems like you picked up engraving and things just kind of took off with live events from there. And that's kind of the primary focus of your business now, if I'm not mistaken. And now you're kind of doing the next evolution of that, which is doing the live calligraphy and engraving at weddings. So I just want to hear more. I think it's so interesting and I would love to hear more about those like different shifts, maybe like what triggered them, like what triggered these evolutions in your business.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I've dabbled in quite a bit of things. I'm kind of embarrassed to like kind of like a serial entrepreneur journey in a way, but I tried the digital product stuff. I did some print on demand things. I've done some virtual assistant work. I've done network marketing. You name it, I've probably tried it. So it's kind of silly to say, but I've learned a lot going through each of those things, to be honest. I'm very grateful for those experiences. But yes, in 2022 is when I really dove into calligraphy with the wedding signage business. And that's how I found you, Xiao Chen, through your amazing course and program. And so that's where that kind of started. And I actually bought my engraving drill in 2022, about at the end of 2022, because I'd seen it on Instagram and seen other calligraphers trying this live event thing. And I was like, okay, that's really amazing. And I would love to try that. And I had 2 kids at that time. So I was like, oh, I've got some time, can try and dabble in that. And of course, that engraver sat on my desk for over a year, didn't touch it. I was too intimidated. So I let it sit there and I let it collect dust. And then I got pregnant with my third baby in early 2023. And I was so sick and I had to turn down all the business I had been working to like get referrals for, and had tried to been connecting with other, wedding professionals to get those connections. And by that time, I had to turn it all down because I was barely functioning in my first trimester of my pregnancy. So, but I was like, I just took a step back and was like, maybe I need to just reevaluate things and focus on my family until had my third baby in October of that year. And then I got that itch again. I was like, I need to try something again, but I couldn't. I knew wedding signage wasn't going to be it. And so then I remembered I have this engraving tool that I need to bust out now and try. And so I finally got it out. I bought a course from Talisa Rosane Art, who has an amazing engraving course that was super helpful for me to get jump started into. And then after I kind of started that practicing and getting more comfortable with that, then I started making calls to businesses and saying, hey, I'm offering live engraving services. If you're ever interested, I'd love to work with you. And so that's how I got my first gig at Anthropology. And then from there, with social media and like my website and my Google business page, things kind of took off. But the like shift, I think I would say, is probably when I had my third baby, because I realized, my time is very limited. And of course, I'm a full-time mom. So like I wanted to make sure that's still a priority for me. But then I also wanted to figure out how to balance stay-at-home mom life with some business that could actually still bless my family financially in some capacity, right? And combine my gifts and talents and my personality in the best way. And man, live events was it. I mean, that has been amazing. I didn't realize how perfect that was going to be of a blend for me and my just how I'm wired and my gifts and what I have and the skills that I have. So that was just like, and not only that, but the income potential. I mean, just to be able to go work for a couple hours and make really good money for what some people may make in like a work week almost. I mean, it's pretty amazing, honestly, to be able to do that. And the luxury market here there's in Scottsdale, there's quite a luxury market. So I'm grateful to be in a market where I can have that potential, right? Some markets don't always have that. So yeah, it's just been kind of the best combination of everything at once. I'm so thankful for how it worked out.
That's amazing. Your story is just, it's so well positioned for kind of our beliefs on this podcast too, because we really believe in building a business that aligns with your life and paying attention to the various seasons that you're in and what your priorities are, and also being okay when those priorities shift and change. And I love that you kind of listened to where you were at and what you were needing at each different phase of your journey. And that led you to exactly where you're supposed to be. I think that we sometimes also get worried about like the twists and turns, or when you were really sick in your first trimester, you could have viewed that as like, oh, this is it. Like my business is failing because I have to turn all this down. And like
Mhm.
instead you were just like, no, I'm going to press pause and I'm gonna wait until like this next store opens. And it sounds like it, like I said, it brought you exactly where you are supposed to be because everything is now just coming into full alignment for you. So
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been awesome.
I've also really loved seeing and being part of your journey. I still remember when we were chatting about that first anthropology job and
Yeah.
seeing how far you've come since then in such a short amount of time. So for any of our viewers on YouTube, you have some of your art posted up behind you on the wall, right? So those are some examples of like your lettering, your digital products.
Mhm.
And I actually really love to hear a little bit more about that part of your journey. I think you went through like a rebrand at the time, right? If I remember, and then you kind of purely went to digital products. And I know that there's calligraphers who are listening who either have more of a product business or are curious about getting to digital products. And I was just kind of curious if you could tell us a little bit about that time too.
Yeah, because I thought when I had my 3rd kid, I wasn't gonna have a lot of time to do any calligraphy business really at all, except digital products. So at the time, I was like, I don't adjusting to 3 kids was a lot, and so
Yeah.
I was wearing my baby while she's napping and, like, working on my iPad, right? Like, that's what I was doing because I didn't know when else to fit it in, and so I just decided, you know what, I guess I have to do products on Etsy and I use a print on demand platform that just processes the orders for me, and it's really hands off. It's very streamlined. I still have my Etsy shop running. I don't advertise anymore, but I still get orders every here and there and I don't have to do anything. It's just purely passive, which is really nice. And so it's been great, but it's just something, it doesn't bring in a bunch of money, but I just keep it up because why not? And I love I decorate my house with them and maybe I'll add more in the future. But right now my focus is more on my live event business. It's a tangible, actionable way for me to just make something, and I just felt like I wanted to be creative still in that early postpartum season. So I just was like, you know what, this is the easiest thing I can probably get my hands on. Doing paper and pen just wasn't the season for that. And so I was like, digital is the way we're going to do it. So Procreate all the way, just learning all the different things about how to vectorize and how to make sure the quality of the print is good. Cause I don't do a lot of print. A lot of it has been just like by hand, right? So yeah, I learned a little bit there, but it was just fun to kind of just get a shop up and going because I just felt like that was the only thing I was going to be able to do in this season. But then I was wrong. And I realized that I can't actually do live events. And I don't know why I waited till I had 3 kids to start them, but I did. So, and here we are. So, but that's okay. It's been great. And it's been a really great learning experience. And I have to say though, I'm so grateful for you two and for other calligraphers that I've connected with on Instagram who have been so generous in like helping me with questions. I mean, I could not have done this on my own. So I do not want to take any credit for that because I learned so much from other calligraphers that I am friends with on Instagram and even my local market too. There's some wonderful women here that have just welcomed me with open arms and we refer to jobs to each other and help each other out and work together. So it's just been really amazing to jump in and be so embraced and welcome so fast.
I feel like I came because I love calligraphy. I stayed for the community, you know?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. 100%.
yeah.
Yes.
But I think that's super motivational that you were able to find kind of different types of income streams that suited your life in motherhood with 3 kids. I think that's super motivational. I'm also such a big fan of diversifying income streams. So I love hearing that you still have your shop open too, because it's passive income for you while you
Yeah.
focus on the more service intensive part of your business, right? Which is like being there, showing up, being present for live events. Okay, so let's talk more about live events. We are having you on primarily to talk about all of the live events you've been doing at weddings, because I understand you've been booking a lot of those this year. You've done several of them. And the idea for this podcast episode actually came about because you're in my pro wedding calligrapher course, as you mentioned. And in my community, one of our students asked for advice on live events at weddings. And you shared such great advice in that Facebook thread that I was like, okay, this needs to be surfaced and shared with more of our community.
Yeah.
And so what I thought we could start with, and this is kind of like a multi-part question, so we can kind of break it down. But in that response, you had highlighted some things that are different for doing live calligraphy at weddings specifically versus doing live calligraphies for a corporate client, retail, or brand. So let's kind of like break those differences down because I think that's what people are going to be really interested in. And hopefully, our listeners have some familiarity with live events in general, maybe have done some live events already on their own. So we're really going to focus on the differences here between doing like a corporate live event versus wedding live event. Why don't we start with like the differences in preparation?
Yeah. So for weddings, I prepare similar ways in some capacity, obviously for weddings versus a corporate or brand event. But when it comes to a wedding, I kind of view it more as like a process, not just like the day of, right? Because when you come to corporate and brand events, you think about, okay, I'm just going to show up and do my services and be there and then I'm done. With a wedding, there's so much more that goes into the planning, right? I mean, people plan weddings for months, even years. I mean, where there's so many moving parts and pieces. So I try to, when I jump in with either a planner or a bride, I try to be there and present and supporting them throughout the process, not just being like, cool, you booked me. I'll see you at your wedding day kind of thing, right?
Right.
Because the wedding is just so much more comprehensive. And it's a wedding day. It's special. It's the couple's special day. And you, as the live event artist, are being brought in as like the thank you gift for their guests. Okay. So it's a very valuable part of the wedding day, even though, you may not be highlighted as like the main thing because it's not about you, but you get to be the avenue to gift their guests who are their special people coming to their special day. And so I just try to view it as that is a very valuable thing to be a part of. And so I try to treat it a little bit more differently and more personal than, say, a corporate or brand event, right? Because you're getting that relationship and you're getting to be with those people because they're celebrating. It's a celebration, it's a party, and everyone's always happy to be there, right? So it's a little bit of a different vibe than a corporate. Not that people are unhappy at corporate events, but there's a lot of corporate events, but the wedding day is a special, unique day. So for prepping, like especially the one thing that's a non-negotiable for sure is to bring an assistant. You need to have an assistant on the wedding day, no question. I don't care how small or big that wedding day is, you need to have someone there with you because things happen, things come up. And if the planner has something that changes last minute, your assistant can go talk to the planner and get that taken care of while you're working or while you're still engaging with the guests and giving them that VIP, this experience for them as you're doing that custom gifting for them. But like there's things like that. And then you have to think about kind of the flow of what you're doing. And like when I finish engraving a glass, for example, my assistant can take it from me, package it up, put it in the gift bag, get that taken care of and set aside so that it's ready to be picked up by the guest later in the night. Right. And so there's things like that that are just invaluable to have someone with you because if I had to do the glasses, package them up, put them up, I mean, there's not enough time for that. And you just run out of, it's just not logistically a good idea. So that is always really important to have someone on hand to help you and they get content for you. You want to get some video, you want to get some photos of you and like you get the wedding photographer will get some, but you won't get those for months, right? After the wedding, but to have someone there who can also capture some content for you is really helpful as well. And just to engage with the guests as well. If you're trying to knock out, a stretch of glasses and he or she can talk to the guests for you and engage with them and answer questions because guests are usually really curious what you're doing because when they go to a wedding, they don't expect to see a live event artist there. That's becoming more popular, but most people haven't seen like live engraving before or seen live personalization in any capacity. And so they are really excited. And so, I mean, guests are like, wait, you're doing that by hand? Are you serious? Like the reactions are great. And it's so much fun because they're always all in a good mood. They're getting some drinks in, they're having some food, like everyone's vibing. It's great. And so just the enthusiasm is really unmatched for a wedding day in general because it's an emotional day and it's celebration. So assistant is a non-negotiable there. And then there's just more admin work up front because you're going back and forth with the planner, you're going back and forth with the bride or planner, whoever you're working with. I mean, there's a strict timeline, so you have to be aware of that, right? There's a fairly strict schedule, right? I mean, some things may give or take a little bit, but overall, a wedding has a very solid structure. And so that's different from a corporate event where you just kind of go there, you're doing your thing for, a few hours and then you're done. So like for example, a wedding I did last October, I actually was engraving at the cocktail hour on the lawn. And then about an hour or two, once everyone went up to the reception dinner up the stairs in a different part, I actually moved my station up to be by the reception hall in the bar. So like you think about that too, like at a corporate event, you're not going to be moving locations. You're going to be staying in one spot, but like to have to take the time to move everything and get the glasses put up in a different spot where they're going to be picked up at the end of the night. I mean, there's just a lot of logistics that go into a wedding day and what even we're doing. So those are just things to always keep in mind because that's time that you need to factor in. And that's why you need an assistant for sure, because you cannot do all that by yourself.
For some of those details, like moving locations and things like that, those are things you're talking to the planner or the
Yes.
bride about ahead of time, so you all know the game plan, who's moving the table, like all of
No,
that kind of
exactly
stuff.
right. Yeah. And that's where it's like that back and forth and that admin work that comes up front for a wedding. 'Cause there's a lot more prep that goes into it. And so that is time that you want to consider factoring into your pricing as well, because that is time working and communicating back and forth with the planner or the bride, just to make sure that everything goes smoothly, because there's a lot of things. And like, you want the gifts to be picked up by the guests on their way out. You don't want them down by the cocktail hour where no one's going to go pick them up because they weren't down there. So just thinking through the flow of the evening and the day, and just how things can be the easiest for everybody. And, because that's the gift, that's their gift, that's their party favor, but it's a way more elevated quality party favor, right? Like, it's not going to be thrown in the trash. Those are be taken home because they have their name
Yeah.
on it and they got to be play a part in that personalization process.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you're highlighting, really taking into account not just the client experience of like the client that you're working with, but also their own guest experience for their
Yes.
wedding. I feel like that's really where the biggest difference, not that, the client experience isn't important for corporate events. It
Of
100% is, but I think
course.
that there's a lot more factors to take into consideration when it is such an important day as a
Yes.
wedding. And,
Yeah.
when you are working with couples, brides, planners, et cetera, it's like they want to work with vendors who are just as excited about that
Mhm.
event as they are.
Yes.
So making sure
100%.
that that's built into your process and that you're giving them that really seamless and elevated experience, because you are providing an elevated service too,
Yep.
right? Like, this isn't just something that Joe Schmo off the street is going to be hiring you for. Like, this is
No.
for a very specific type of event. So in addition to having an assistant on site and kind of thinking through some of these various logistics, like maybe having to move tables, where everything is going to go, what are some of the other differences that come into play when you are on site at a wedding doing live engraving or live calligraphy versus a corporate, or retail style event?
Yeah, I think the only thing that comes to mind right now is just I would try to move a bit quicker in a wedding setting versus a corporate, because I don't know. I try to think about my workflow and understand that the quicker I can get through things, the quicker I can get these gifts to the guests if they want them. And if not, they'll pick them up in the night. But so I just think about things like, for example, by the time I did my first wedding, I was able to be at the point where I didn't have to draft anything for engraving. And so I could just move a bit quicker on the glassware and just freehand engrave by that point, which was very helpful. That time just kind of adds up and just helps you sit pocket, I don't know, 15 to 20 seconds an item or whatever. And that, that kind of helps as the night goes on, especially if you're at a more of a high volume wedding. We're talking like, over 130 people, 140 people, which is a very solid size wedding, right? Especially when you're by yourself and you're only artist engraving. So there's just things like that where just having experience with other events prior to that can be very helpful, because you have your workflow down pat, you know how things go, you have your setup and that you're used to. If a bride comes to me and asks, can you engrave 150 glasses in 4 hours, and the answer is yes, I can. Or maybe a little less depending, but with an assistant I for sure can, because they can take care of the other stuff for me as well. I just can at least focus on the guests and focus on getting the engraving done.
Let's talk a little bit more about that, like, on-site workflow. So,
Mhm.
you kind of start during cocktail hour
Mhm.
typically, right? During the
Yeah.
wedding. And
Yeah.
cocktail hours at a wedding usually last maybe an hour, hour and a half.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
the rest of the time, like you were kinda saying, maybe 4 hours on site, the guests are maybe going to the reception, and you are still at your engraving station finishing up all the orders, is that right?
Yeah, and like I said, for the one I did in October, I started the cocktail hour, was probably there for, probably about 2 hours, because there was an hour-long cocktail hour, and then they went up to the reception area, and then I just stayed down there and just kept trying to knock some out, and while they moved the other glasses that were done, while my assistant and the planner helped get things put away where they needed to go, and then get my table set up in the other area, so while I'm still working, they can all take
Mm.
care of those logistics. But one thing I do wanna mention is that for weddings, typically depending on the venue situation, if you're at the same venue for the ceremony and reception, the setup is usually going to be about before ceremony too. So you have to account for that time that you're going to be there an hour potentially before ceremony. And then the ceremony goes on and then you start engraving. So you're looking at another hour and a half potentially that you haven't even started yet, that you're there on site. So that's just things that I actually didn't think about when I first did
Mm.
my first wedding, because I was like, "I didn't account for that time when I priced that out." So
Yeah.
next time, that's where after that, I was like, for sure pivoting to a package or flat rate versus hourly, because weddings are just they're different. They're a different layout, different structure than your typical event, and so those are just things you just learn as you go. But it's just helpful to keep that in mind when
Yeah.
you're pricing that out as well.
That is actually so helpful because I have a proposal out for a event at a wedding, and I also was like, "Oh, just show up right before cocktail hour," but you're right, it's like ceremony right before cocktail
Yeah,
hour.
yeah, but yeah, that's time you're on site, but you gotta be there ready to go, so the
Yeah.
ceremony, yeah, it's things that you don't think about until you're really doing it.
So another thing you had mentioned, I think in the Facebook group about being on site was I think you suggested having 2 six-foot long tables, if I remember correctly, which
Oh,
I think
yeah,
might be a little bit different, right? Because a lot of times when we're on site, we just have the one. So tell
yes.
us more about that setup. I kinda wanna get into the details into this episode. I feel like
Yeah,
that's what's gonna
sure.
be really helpful for people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't have to be 2 six-foot tables, I guess, but you need 2 tables, I would recommend, only because if you're doing a wedding, you're gonna probably be doing a minimum of 75 to 80 items, right? Maybe probably more. I mean, let's be honest. So we had 2 tables, 1, because we set up the glasses first, have them ready to go. Mostly, not all of them were out, but we had a good chunk of them out because the first wedding I did, they could pick a choice of 4 drinkware options. So we had the wine glass, we had the martini glass, the coupe glass, and the rocks glass all set up. So they could see the options first of all to choose from. But that's a lot of glasses we're talking about juggling there. So just to have the room to set those out so the guests can see, but then also for me to be able to pull one or my assistant could hand me them quickly to just get them engraved and get them done. So just streamlining that process, but then also having room on the other table to set them up in the gift bag or however the bride or planner decides to package them up for the guests to take
Mhm.
home. And then I always bring order forms as well. And we just tape those order forms to the gift bags with like a cute washi tape or something so that the guests can easily find their gift bag at the end of the night. So, and ideally, I think logistically it'd be great to line them up alphabetically or by table, depending on how that works if there's time. But at the end of the day, the guests will find it regardless. We try to make it as easy as possible for them to easily locate their item when they're leaving for the night. So yeah, it's just nice to have that space to have the glasses unpackaged and ready to go, but then also have the room to package them up and get them ready to be taken home later. So just to
Yeah.
have enough room for all of that to take place.
That's so helpful to think through. And even the piece about packaging up the glasses
Mhm.
that I was kind of just imagining the glasses being put on the table, but yeah, when people are taking them home, you
Yeah.
want a way for hopefully them to not break them on the way home, right? So
Yes,
that's
right, and that's yeah, actually, a guest dropped their bag after they picked it up, and I saw it happen, but somehow miraculously, the cup did not break. I don't know how, but it was a miracle, but, things happen, and that's where it's also important when you're working with your client, either the bride or the planner, to make sure they order extras because things happen, things break, guests drop
Mhm.
items, or, you may make a mistake once in a while. We are human, but, like, they're not common, but we do make them sometimes, so it's just always nice to have extras on hand, recommending like 5 to 10% at least of options to have just in case.
So you had touched on this before where you kind of mentioned that you've switched to package pricing versus hourly because of taking things like arriving before ceremony time, et cetera, into account. So can we talk a little bit about the pricing of, engraving at weddings or, doing live artistry services at weddings versus corporate and kind of the differences in how you've decided to make that shift from, an hourly rate? Because I think that is what we've seen standard for
Mhm,
live calligraphy services. Although I will say, even among myself and other calligraphers that I'm talking to, I feel like everybody's kind of making a shift toward package
mhm.
rates at this point. But specifically for weddings, would love to hear your take on that and your experience with it.
Yeah, I mean, from my first experience with it, I just realized I totally undercharged. And I was like, oh boy, I got to change that next time. I didn't account for the prep time before ceremony, just being there for those an hour, hour and a half, potentially even closer to 2 hours, depending on how things go for that time. But then what I try to do with my wedding clients, I tell them that I'm not only just going to show up the day of, I want to be there to help you along the way if there's any questions. So I've helped some brides brainstorm ideas if they need help brainstorming, if they're not totally sure what they're looking for their wedding day, for just, items to engrave or personalize. But then also I offer sourcing support. So if they need help finding where should I order these from? Where can I find the best deal? I will help them with that as well. So I factor all that in because that is time. I'm working with them too. So I want to make sure that I account for that because I want to bring value to them, not only on the wedding day, but just help any way that I can in that process. So, yeah, those are things that I just hadn't thought about the first time. So now it's just nice to learn those things and make that price adjustment. So yeah, so definitely a package price or flat rate, I think is just much more practical when it comes to weddings. And with wedding clients, they are expecting to pay. They've paid for their photographer, they paid for their videographer, they're paid for all these things. So they do know it's going to cost them something. And you're providing a live service. So it's not like it's just a cheap thing that anyone can do. It is a luxury service when we think about it, and we're bringing a luxury gifting experience for their guests. And like, yeah, just to remind yourself, yeah, I am part of the gifting for these people. And so the bride and groom chose to invest in me to bring a gifting experience to their guests at their special wedding day. So I just try to remind myself that of what value that brings for them, with a personal connection and a personalized gifting experience that no machine can replicate, right? Like no machine can do that. That's only us event calligraphers can do that, which is really special.
Yeah, I think positioning your pricing as a package versus the hourly really
Mhm.
sets you up for positioning your services as that full service experience
Yeah.
versus like you're just paying me for the time that I'm going to spend at your
Yes.
wedding day. And I think it also goes into helping to position you as the expert and, kind of the guide in this journey and this experience. And I think it also allows you to kind of step into that role by, somebody isn't going to be questioning, well, can you only be there for 2 hours because I only want to pay this much? Or, you know what, I don't need an assistant. It's like, no, no, no. I've designed these
Mhm.
packages to ensure that you have the very best experience. And if it's not in your budget, it's not in your budget. But if you want to provide this service, like this is how it needs to be presented to your guests, or else you're not going to be happy with the end result. Your guests aren't going to be
Right.
happy with the result, and I'm not going to be happy with the end result.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's another thing too about pricing, to make sure you factor in the cost of your assistant too, because you want to pay them for their time as well. So that's something that can kind of get lost in the weeds there, but definitely make sure you factor that in as well.
So I think just to give our listeners kind of like I guess, a benchmark of pricing for these live events for 4 hours on site, I mean, we're easily talking like over $1,000 for a
Oh,
package, right?
absolutely more. Yeah. I would say even more. Yeah.
Yeah, for
For
sure.
sure. But depending, though
Yeah.
I know markets are different and depending on location and things. And if you have to try, if you have to drive, if your mileage, if you're going, farther for a wedding, you need to factor that in the pricing as well. So don't forget that, because that's your time and value and your efforts to get there. So that needs to be factored in as well.
Yeah, so I think the main things I heard in terms of factoring for pricing, and we always talk about pricing being personal, so we're not gonna advise a specific price, but, you wanna take into account things like the time on site at the wedding, the time and mileage and gas, driving, or any transportation expenses, paying
Yes.
your assistant,
Mhm.
and all of the time of coordination that you talked about before, potentially helping them source, being an advisor, working on logistics, all of that, and that kind of all goes into your pricing package, right? I think those are the main things, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So we kind of already touched on this. I think you had mentioned it earlier as well, but just based on your experience, if somebody has never done a live event before, so like a live corporate luxury retail event, would you recommend that they do that first before transitioning to live calligraphy at weddings or live engraving at weddings?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I mean, if you can help it, obviously, right? I was so thankful that my first wedding inquiry came after I had gotten, a handful of events under my belt, right? And so I had my workflow down. I knew what I needed for my setup and felt comfortable with that. And you can always control if you get like a high volume event before that. So I wouldn't say that's necessary to be like at a high volume corporate event or anything like that. But anything helps, just anything, because it's really hard to replicate that live event kind of pressure, at home. You can't really do it. You don't have a bunch of strangers looking at you, watching what you're
To
doing.
have all your kids stand around the table watching you.
Yeah, I mean, you could try like have your partner or your kids spat out names and like start trying to write them quickly or whatever. But like, yeah, at the end of the day, you can't mimic that until you're really there. So yes, I would 100%, if you can help it, try and get some, even if you have to do them for, like a low rate or free, potentially just for the experience. That experience is invaluable. Okay. Like it is not wasted at all, because like just the workflow, like we talked about earlier, like you need to have that down pat. You need to know how many items you can engrave in like a rough, amount of time to have a good idea, to make sure you are bringing the best experience to the guests in the wedding. Because the last thing you want to do is jump in too soon and do an event and be unprepared and be flustered and panicking. And then when you haven't done it before, and then you've got people looking at you and they're waiting and you're just like freaking out, and you don't want that because that reflects poorly on you too. And we don't want you to get a bad review or things like that. You want to be as prepared as you can. So I would highly recommend 100% do your best to get a couple events under your belt before you do your first wedding. No question.
I 100% agree with that, everything you said. If you are not able to get a corporate live event, for example, one of the things that helped me was I did live calligraphy for like a pop-up that I was at. So
Yeah.
someone bought something and I could personalize it for them. That's a similar type of experience. It's not exactly the same, but just I think the idea is just like try to put yourself in as similar of a situation as possible to replicate that so you can kind of prepare yourself.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great I would have never thought of that. So that's perfect. Yeah, that's so much better than nothing. I mean, right? Like that's
Mhm. Yeah,
great.
you have a
That's
little
great.
bit more control in it because you can go participate in a market or actively
Yes.
seek that out, you know?
Yeah, I love that.
All right, let's talk about booking these types of events.
Mhm.
So I'd love to hear, like, and I'm sure our listeners would love to know, where are your leads primarily coming from for this
Mhm.
service?
Yeah.
And I mean, as we know, this is kind of like an up and coming trend,
Mhm.
doing the live calligraphy at weddings. So I'm really curious about kind of the level of education around this. Like, are your couples coming to you because they already know about it?
Mm.
Or is it like the planners coming up with the idea and they're looping you in? How does it kind of happen?
No, that's a great question. Yeah. So for me, I've had a bit of a blend, but I connected with some planners over Instagram, right? And so that was how I first got my first wedding. A wedding planner had shared about I was engraving some perfumes for one of her clients, and she shared about that on her Instagram. Another wedding planner saw it and was like, "Hey, we need someone to do live engraving at a wedding. Is she available?" And so then they reached out to me, and come to find out, the bride had seen one of Kat Lauren Calligraphy's reels on Instagram and was like, I want that at my wedding. So thank you, Kat, for that and Kat and I are friends and she's amazing. And she's kind of the pioneer of the weddings, I would say. And she's been invaluable to me. But just to see I feel like the brides are finding it more on Instagram or, through the viral stuff that Kat and other event calligraphers are putting out. So they kind of tend to know about it. And that's where the brides that have reached out to me individually are ones who have seen it on Instagram most of the time. But I did have a couple Google inquiries from a few brides who had just found me on Google and they were just looking for, I guess, live event artists. I don't know what they're Googling exactly, engraver, things like that. It's been kind of a mix. But the planners, it's funny. I was talking to Kat about this too, actually, just having to kind of educate some planners about it because I assumed that the planners knew about this. I was wrong. They actually don't. And so it's newer and upcoming, but like some planners actually don't know about this opportunity. And so in this service that can be brought in as a luxury add-on. So yeah, so it's been kind of like a mix of educational, but most of the time it's mostly the planners know about it or the brides do know about it already. But yeah, it is new and upcoming trend. So there's definitely some education there because we just can't assume that everyone knows we're doing this or knows that we offer this. And we kind of have to get out there and kind of share that more and do our part to share that.
Such a good reminder that we're the ones who know our business and our industry the best.
Yeah.
Like, this is still very new, and so I know this is, like right now we're recording this in the beginning of February, and I'm encouraging all of my mentees, all my students to be doing their outreach to planners to kind of
Yeah.
like, reintroduce or introduce themselves and explain what their services are. So that's a great opportunity in that email to kind of introduce this new idea, this new kind of up and coming service of gifting that can hopefully prompt like a further conversation with the planner.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's great. You're encouraging them to do that because I think the more and more we see it, the more it's going to catch on. And I mean, live experiential gifting is trending. I mean, it is trending 100% in corporate brands. I mean, it is trending. So it's just the weddings. The weddings are ripe and ready for it, I think.
I would love to know if if there's calligraphers out there who, have gotten their feet wet with live events for corporate luxury clients, etc. They're really intrigued by the live wedding. They like working with weddings, or maybe they already offer wedding services. For example, like we can use myself. I'm in the wedding industry and I'm like, oh, I really want to do live weddings. I have like some ideas of how I would kind of dip my toes in that or start pitching it to people, but would
Yeah.
love to hear from your perspective of like, if somebody doesn't necessarily have the content to share yet
Mhm.
from a wedding or something like that, how can they start to talk about it or put it out there that like this is something that they want to be offering in 2025? Because I think a lot of people, if they don't have the content yet,
Mhm.
they don't talk about it or they feel like they can't talk about it because they don't have the experience yet. And I
Mhm.
want to push back on that so hard
Yeah.
because you have some sort of experience under your belt. So would just
Mhm.
love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, I can resonate with that because I felt that way for a little while, right? I knew I've always loved weddings and wanted to try and get into weddings and right away, but obviously I knew I needed to work my way there. But I mean, for me, the way I tried to enter into it, because I wasn't really doing, I'd stopped doing my wedding signage services, a couple years ago. So that wasn't really there for me anymore. And so to kind of have already that entryway in. But honestly, I started trying to do focus on getting bridal perfume bottles and things where I could do engraving gifting for brides. And so that's where I started. And so the wedding planner that I worked with for my first bride client to do like just engraving, gift engraving for the bride and the groom's perfume and cologne bottles. I haven't done a live wedding with her yet, but she finally booked me for one next month. So I'm so excited because she didn't know I did that. She only thought I did engraving for gifting. And so I had to tell her, girl, I can do live weddings. Let's do this. And she was ecstatic. She was like, I am going to market you to all of my clients, which is like amazing and like the best thing you could hear from wedding planner. But I'm so excited to work with her in next month. I can't wait. We're gonna have so much fun. But so I try to find a way to get into the brides through that avenue. I know that may not be feasible or typical for other people. So, but if you don't, yeah, like I didn't have content either. I didn't have anything to post. I would just film myself recording on a perfume bottle, or you could just find some samples of things like luggage tags and do foiling on luggage tags and say, you could show, yourself foiling them and then post a picture of like, look at this amazing seating chart wall that has all these foiled luggage tags on it. And you could, tag the planner that wedding it's from or something just to like have something where people could see, okay, that's a really cool idea or like things like that, where it's just, I don't know. I mean, I struggle with content. I'm not the best at posting consistently on Instagram, but to get yourself out there, you've just got to start generating something because it's just not going to happen unless you're talking to people. And I did put together like a marketing or like a services guide to send to planners so they knew, hey, these are the services I'm offering. And there are planners that I've talked to before or I connected with when I was doing my wedding signage business side. So it wasn't a bunch of like cold planner, which you can do. Nothing wrong with that. Okay. Don't be afraid to do that because cold emailing, I did cold calling. That's how I got my first live event gig. Okay. So like that is not like that counts. That can count for something. But I mean, I would just trying to put together some things like if you have a flyer, you can put together and have some examples of some engravings you've done and that are nice pictures you can put on a PDF and send it to some planners. Or if you just want to connect and if there's a group of wedding professionals that you can tap into, that there's a bunch of networking groups that's something I'm thinking about joining this year, a group you have to pay for, but to just get that networking and community is just invaluable. So, but I think there's just little things you can do. If I hadn't put my stuff out there, I would have never gotten the clients for the engraving of bridal and cologne, the perfume and cologne bottles, but then I would have never got my first live wedding if I hadn't done that. So it's just, you just don't know how things are going to domino into each other, but you just have to try. You just have to try and not hold back. Cause I was terrified. I was terrified to do live events. But once you get a few under your belt, you're like, okay, this is fun and I can do this. And people love it. It's such a special experience for them. So, but yeah, I just baby steps. I would just say baby steps and be patient, but don't give up on connecting with other people, especially and if you want to do weddings, find those great wedding planners that are willing to talk and because wedding planners can be hot or cold, right? Like some of them a lot of them are so busy. So the last thing you want to do is be like bothering them. But at the same time, you have value to bring and you can bring a really special experience to their weddings and their clients if you get the chance to talk to them. So it's worth sharing.
I always think about how, like, part of the planner's job is to help their client find the vendors. So I
Yes.
feel like it's actually when you reach out, it's actually doing them a service. It's helping them because you're like, "Oh, you're looking for this type of service. Hello, I'm right here. I'm in your inbox. You don't have to go look for me anymore." So
Right.
I think we just need to take that mindset that, like, when we are reaching out to them, we're also helping them in some way. We're adding value, like you said.
I love that.
Oh, and I wanted to also talk about, like, one of the points you made was earlier was, like, around doing more live events and the practicing piece. It's
Mhm.
also I think the other important reason to go and do some of these, especially before you book weddings, is, like, you don't know if you like it if you've never done it. We talk about this a lot too, and
Mhm.
it's totally fine if you do it and you realize that's not what you love because
Mhm.
I think a lot of being in front of people and it's a performance art, right? And I think you have to enjoy doing calligraphy in front of people if
Yes.
you do more of these live events too. And some people are just not that's not gonna be their cup of tea, and that's totally fine.
Yeah, you're so right. That's why I do tell people it's like it is a performance. I mean, you are really out there performing in front of people and I mean, I love that. It's part of the fun for me and I think it's a blast, but it is nerve-wracking. I get nervous before every event. I mean, so hopefully that helps somebody who's like I was like I ask other girls like, "Do you guys still get nervous?" Like, "I still get nervous before events." But then you get going and you're fine. But, I think that's normal. It's exciting and but it is a performance. And so yeah, like personality-wise, if you don't enjoy talking to people and don't enjoy being around people, I probably wouldn't recommend live events for you. But hey, you can step out of your comfort zone and give it a try and see what you think. But yeah, you're so right, Shasha, and I totally agree with you on
Yeah.
that.
I have one more question related to kind of when we were talking about selling this service, and I
Yeah.
love the idea of having a service guide or a brand deck, lookbook, whatever you wanna call it, but just some way to, like, educate and introduce that you can when you're reaching out to planners or other wedding vendors, you can attach with your email. I
Yeah.
wanted to talk a little bit about how and maybe this is a discussion between the 3 of us, because I don't know if you've been doing this before already, but how we can sell this service with other wedding products and services that we already offer. So I was kinda thinking it through in my head, and I would love to hear your thoughts too. But, like, in my mind, someone can come in through, like, multiple entry points asking for wedding services. So someone might come like, maybe I'm known for signage, someone comes in inquiring for signage,
Yeah.
and so maybe what I would do is kind of fulfill their immediate request, answer their question with what I can offer,
Mhm.
and then when I see the opportunity, either during the conversation process, like if I'm doing a call with them or before I'm kind of putting together their proposal, introduce this service.
Yeah.
Or I could see a second point of introducing this upsell service after I book them for the signage. And then I kind of mention a little bit further down the road, "Hey, I also offer this service now. Are you more interested in it?" So
Yeah.
I'm just trying to kind of like I feel like for our listeners who are already kind of in the wedding space, I want to
Mhm.
try to figure out like where do we start talking about this service? So
Yeah.
I'm curious what you guys think.
I mean, that's a great point. I think I would probably default to once I got booked, I would probably bring it up if someone came to you for like wedding signage or something. I don't know if there's a way you could send them a PDF of like that kind of encapsulates here's what to expect. Here's what I offer. Here's some styles. Here's some sample, like some pictures of signs that I've done before, but then also like have a page of some other services I offer as
Right.
well, maybe kind of hint like talking about it there in some way. So at least it gets in front of them some way. And then maybe touch on it on a follow-up call if you do have a call and say, hey, did you happen to see the other services I do offer? Would love to work with you in this capacity as well, if it's something you're looking for.
Elaine, I'm curious about your thoughts.
Yeah, I feel like I would probably do kind of a hybrid. I would add it to if this was gonna be a service that I was offering, I would definitely add it to my service guide, which they get as soon as they inquire with me in, like, my first email response back. So, that outlines all of my signage services, but then I would also make sure that I have a page dedicated to, live calligraphy at your wedding, highlighting like what this experience is and what it brings to your guests and how it kind of ties into your favors and all of that. So I would definitely do that in the service guide. And then I get on a call with all of my couples. So part of my process would be to start to ask them, like, what is really important to you for your wedding day? What kind of things do you have planned? What do you have planned for your favors? Or, those types of things. Cause we're usually diving into like those specific details.
Yeah.
And if it feels like a natural flow in that conversation, I would bring it up. Like if they're like, oh, we really want to create like a super personalized experience for our guests and we're still trying to figure out what it is, then I'd probably flow right into like pitching that service as well. But if they don't, I mean, if it's not important to them, then I'm kind of like, maybe I would bring it back up down the road. But if they don't like highlight that right at the beginning, and I know that like they know that it's something that I offer, then I'm not going to pitch it to them again, because then that feels like a push to me. But then also the flip side, if they come to me for live engraving, again, I would send them my service brochure that outlines my signage.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then on that call, I would also be like, if you want everything to be really consistent and cohesive between what we're providing for your guests at the actual wedding day and what they're seeing and experiencing as they're moving through your wedding with your signature cocktail signs and your seating chart and your welcome sign, like I would love to create a very cohesive package for you so that it's, a like fully branded, elevated, personalized experience for your guests, from like the visuals to what they're actually tangibly walking away with at the end of the night.
Love
Yeah,
that.
I love that. I think what we wanna highlight here is that if you're already in the wedding industry and doing wedding work, this is like a great additional opportunity that if you feel comfortable doing and offering, that you should definitely talk about. So just
Mhm.
because someone comes to you for something that maybe you are more known for right now, whether that's signage or something else, invitations or something else, don't forget to bring this up in whatever you feel like is the right point in the conversation. And kind of we wanted to share a couple of ideas of how we might approach it, because this is so new for our industry. I don't think anybody has like a tried and true blueprint for pitching this right now. So I think hopefully sharing these different perspectives is helpful for giving you ideas of how you might bring this up in a conversation with your client.
Yeah, I think that the number one thing to remember is that, and we kind of touched on this before, not every single person coming to you is going to know every single service that you offer. So your job as the business owner is to talk about what you do and to talk about it a lot, to talk about it honestly ad nauseum, because you're going to feel like you're constantly repeating yourself, but not everybody is reading every single page on your website. Not everybody is seeing every single Instagram post that you share. Not everybody's reading every page in your service guide, or maybe even opening up your service guide when you send it. So it's just, if there's something that you want to be doing and you feel comfortable to start offering it or whatever the case may be, talk about it. I mean, I had so many people who would come to me and be like, "Oh, I didn't realize you did menus and ceremony programs." I'm like, "Oh, I'm not doing a good job of telling people that in addition to signage, I also offer day of stationery." And so I tweaked my processes and things that I was sending clients to make sure that it's, they're getting the full picture. So
Mhm.
just always remembering, like, we got to talk about our businesses more than we feel like we should. Well, Kendall, this has been such a fantastic conversation. I feel like we covered so much, and I can picture listeners sitting there with a notepad, furiously scribbling notes as they're listening to this. I know I'm going to go back and re listen and take my own notes. So, thank you so much for sharing your time with us, as well as just all of the knowledge and experience that you have gained from this really exciting journey. It's so fun to watch how your business has shifted over the years and how you just feel like it just seems like you've really come into like your niche, what you really love, and you're owning it. So that's really amazing. For anybody who wants to continue following along, wants to connect with you on Instagram, things like that, can you share with our listeners where they can find you?
Yeah, my Instagram is at Cedar Cliff Designs and my website is cedarcliffdesigns.com. So yeah, I'm happy to talk to any other calligraphers. I mean, we're all about community here and helping each other out. So if there's ever any questions, I'd be happy to help you because we are all in it together because it's a rising tide for real. I mean, we all have to lift each other up because the more weddings we do, the more opportunities there are for everybody. So I'm happy to do that. So thank you guys so much for having me. It's an honor. I feel so privileged to be here with you guys. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kendall. As someone who is like in my programs and kind of has seen you through your journey, I just want to say I'm like, I feel so proud of you, if I'm allowed to be proud of you.
Of course you are.
Thank you so much for being on our show.
Of course. Thank you guys.
Hey, if you have been enjoying having us in your earbuds and you're ready to have our eyes on your business, here's how you can work with us. Hi, I'm Xia Chen, and I help calligraphers start profitable businesses. If you've been dreaming about starting your calligraphy business, I created my free masterclass just for you. I break down the shift that allowed me to move from $25 Etsy jobs to booking 4-figure wedding clients, and I teach you the 3 steps that will allow you to book more high-paying clients even if you're just starting in your business. You can watch it right now. Just head to the link in the show notes to sign up.
And I'm Elaine. If you're ready to scale your calligraphy business with confidence and ease, then I'd love to help. Inside Flourish and Biz, my signature 12-week group coaching program, I help calligraphers like you craft a luxury experience that makes you stand out, streamline your workflows to free up hours every single week, and effortlessly attract high-end clients who value your work and are excited to invest with you, all without adding more to your to-do list. Learn more at the link in our show notes.
And as always, come hang out with us on Instagram at Calligraphy Biz Corner. Follow our show and give us a quick rating. It really, really helps other creatives like you to discover us.
Until next time, keep the ink flowing and the dreams growing.